Hello everyone, my name is Udit Sharma and welcome to lecture number 5 of the series Demystifying VARC for the CAT exam. So here is a brief intro about me and my performance across the VARC sections. You can go through it while I discuss what we are going to study today. So today we are going to focus upon environmental studies. So basically environment and ecology. So nowadays things like climate change, plastic pollution or pollution in general, air pollution, etc., climate finance, renewable energy, positive deindustrialization, uh, urban studies such as waste management or making kind of spawn cities or city management or environmentally sustainable cities. These things are in fashion, and these topics can be asked in your exam as well in the form of an RC. So if you have a clear understanding of what these actually are, and if you have some introduction to this topic of environment and ecology, you will be able to easily handle these topics. So the two things: first is that climate change or topics on environment may come either as passing reference in a larger topic, such as say if the topic is about industrialization, so climate change might come as a passing reference, or they can be whole dedicated passage upon climate change and how we are, there is research presented on it, and what are the steps that we are taking, where are we lacking. So a passage can come as, like this as well. Mostly, as you will see also, most of the passages are research based in this domain. So there will be some concept, research on that concept, and then views for, against, and then there'll be questions on it. So I'm just going to give you an introduction of this topic. So let's dive straight into it. So first of all, yeah, wait one second. Yeah. So uh, these are the major environmental issues that we currently have, right? So I'm not going to go about them in detail, but I'll just you can read it from the PDF and attach it. But it's like climate change. Then there is deforestation, that is cutting of trees. Biodiversity loss. Biodiversity loss means loss of natural flora and fauna, both, that is animals and plants, because of say industrialization, urbanization, or in general change of climate, and which causes say wildfires, and then it also leads to biodiversity loss. Then there is plastic pollution. So that there is huge dumping of plastic in both land and in oceans. Then there is air pollution. This everybody is very much aware of. Then there is water scarcity, ocean acidification, soil degradation. So I'll just explain this. Water scarcity is less water for purposes such as drinking, industrial use, agriculture, etc. So per capita, when availability of water is less. Ocean acidification is oceans becoming more acidic because this is ocean, and then there is a lot of carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide gets dissolved in ocean and form carbonic acid. Or then there is nitrogen and sulfur also in the atmosphere, so it may make a nitric acid or sulfuric acid, and that's why it increases the acidification. What happens is, typically if oceans become more acidic, most of our shells or say bones are made up of calcium. So calcium will try to neutralize or get etched away because of the acid. So that is ocean acidification. Ocean heating is also a problem. Marine heat waves, that a topic may come upon, that oceans are getting hotter, and due to hotter oceans, corals get affected. Then soil degradation, we all know about land-based pollution. What happens is that you have excessive pesticides, fungicides, or fertilizers that are being used, which cause degradation of the land. Then there is unplanned construction, which leads to topsoil erosion, and deforestation also further leads to topsoil erosion. So you can read all this. I'll attach the PDF. So these are some basic concepts. One thing I would like to you to know is that you must know what exactly pollution is. Pollution, typically, we say when we add even CO2 to the atmosphere, that is also pollution. But in reality, pollution is adding of gases which are detrimental or harmful to humans and animals. So this typically includes carbon monoxide, SO2, SOx, NOx, and PM, particulate matters. So exactly, CO2 is not considered to be a pollutant. It's a greenhouse gas. So you must know the difference between pollutant and a greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases are those gases which may be absolutely fine to us. Like we can breathe them, it may not cause us breathing problems or may not kill us, but they trap heat. So when they trap heat, what happens is, like this is the sun. If this is the sun and its radiation, so they trap the sun's heat that we get from the sun, and this leads to global warming. So typically, CO2 is not a pollutant; it's a greenhouse gas, right? If you go to AQI index of India and see what are the pollutants, you will find the list. There are about eight or so, I guess. So this was one concept that I wanted you to be clear about. So there can be certain gases which are both greenhouse gases as well as CO2. For example, sulfur dioxide is a GHG as well as a pollutant. So it's both a GHG and a pollutant. So important theories in environmental ethics. So we studied about ethics in the first, I guess, third lecture. But environmental ethics becomes very important because a lot of topics come on this, and we'll study this in brief. So what basically it does is explore the moral relationship between humans and the environment. Is environment for us to use? Is it do we own the environment, or are we trustees of the environment? Are we part of the environment, or humans are larger than the environment? So concepts like this. So then there is different theories I've presented. One is anthropocentrism. See, wherever word anthro comes, it means human. So anthropocentrism means that humans are the centric. So everything in the nature or environment is for the humans. Okay, humans are the central most significant of the entities, and the nature has value insofar only to serve the human needs. Okay, so you can okay, so of course the implication of this is that we'll be exploited of the environment, and that is bad. So environmental conservation is justified to protect resources. Just for example, you uh, somebody might say that exploitation of environment is okay because to justify human life. But is that anthropocentrism? Anthropocentrism basically says that we need to save the environment because we need environment to live. Humans need environment to live. So environmental conservation is justified to protect resources for current and human future living. So these are the criticisms ignores the of non-human life. That is both environment as such, animal, plants, etc. Then there is biocentrism, which means that life-centered, all living beings and not just humans are intrinsic value and deserve moral conservation. So पहले में humans था, this में humans plus plants plus animals. But here still we are not talking about environment, की nature, the river, the mountains, the forest as a whole, not the tree, but the forest as a whole. It needs conservation. So moral implication is that again, the broader it is, so you will now, if you are biocentric, you will also try to protect a natural park, even though humans are not living there, but animals are. Okay, so in anthropocentrism, you might have ignored a natural park, but in biocentrism, you will not ignore it. Now comes ecocentrism. This says that environment inherently is important. So say even desert, many people don't live there, or it may have less number of uh, say species of plants, but it inherently has some value, and we must respect it. So ecosystem environment as a whole has intrinsic value, and the preservation is morally imperative. So focus on maintaining ecological balance and protecting biodiversity. Yeah, even at the expense of, it says that human interests and also sometimes interests of one particular species, right? So that's what basically human it's are. So a very good example of ecocentrism is that there is an ecology that you want to conserve, and then there are invasive species in that ecology. So even invasive species such as say weeds, or sometimes water hyacinth is also considered to be an invasive species. So even this is a species. So, but for the greater ecology, you will ignore its requirement and focus upon this. Hence, we may take measures to remove the invasive species or kill it, etc. So that is ecocentrism. Then you can read about deep ecology. What deep ecology says that advocates a radical restructuring of human society to align with intrinsic value of all living beings and nature. मतलब, like tribals live, for example, don't pollute. For example, don't use gas-based cars. Live in sustainable homes. Produce your own energy using solar. So this is radical. So you can say calls for simple living, population control. Even population control is a part of it. So it says that basically less humans, less exploitative of environment, and thus it's good. Of course, it's extreme and impractical. Then there is social ecology. It links everything. So environmental problems are rooted in social hierarchies and economic environments. Addressing them requires transforming the societies. Core example of this is people say that Yamuna is polluted. A lot of pollution from Yamuna goes from the slums which are next to the Yamuna bank. So they directly put in stuff in the Yamuna. So it's also from industries, but a lot of them is also from the slums. So this slum actually was a social problem, right? Because of social inequality or poor urban management, or even say urban way of living, the poor urban way of living, where there is a huge inequalities between the rich and the poor. So you have high rise at one place and slums just next to the high rise. So this is a social problem which translated into an ecological problem or environmental problem. Same is the case with this uh, crop stubble burning or parali जिसको बोलते हैं हिंदी में. Stubble burning, what happens is that a farmer does not have the enough resources to manage his stubble. So it's a social, and typically they are poor. They don't have say enough resources to manage the stubble, and then they burn it, which causes environmental problem. Emphasizing on communal living, sustainable technologies. So, for example, if just let me out of this. For example, now today we talk about sustainable technologies such as happy seeder, using happy seeder for put not so that you can directly sow in the next seed and you don't have to burn the stubble, or you have something known as pusa decomposer, which helps in early faster decomposition of all the stubble. So these are certain technologies that you can use for it. So that is the social ecology idea of environmental ethics. uh, you can read the criticism and examples on your own. Say focuses more on social system and directly environmental issues. So of course your main focus is social system, and then you expect environment to get happy. But even rich pollute. And if you read reports from across the globe, you see that top say 10% have nearly 40% of the global emission, something like that. So this might not be accurate, but something like that. You can search it. It was, I guess, an Oxfam report. So then ecofeminism. We talked about this. Chipko movement, Apico movement. Basically females coming together to protect the environment. Yeah, it's given Chipko movement in India. So like exploitation of nature with oppression of women. It links those. Calls for dismantling patriarchal structures to achieve ecological and gender justice, because it says that women inherently care more about the environment and the sources which are next to them. So that's why ecofeminism is an idea of environmental ethics. Then there is land ethics, that Gisby Land Peo, that is proposed by for Aldo Leopard. It emphasizes that humans are part of the biotic community and should act as stewards of the land. Stewards are like, for example, Gandhiji gave the model of trusteeship, that you are trustees. God has imposed trust upon you and given you the right to manage certain resources. Do not break that trust. So you are trustees. Ethical responsibility extends to soil, water, plants, etc. So you can read this. Animal rights theory is, a lot of time cat RC passages will come upon ethics of, say, testing medicines, or say new inventions upon animals, rats, mice, guinea pigs, etc. So this is animal rights theory. Non-human animals have moral rights too. There will be passages on feelings of animals. For example, in Cat 2024 only, slot 2, there was a passage upon human animal conflict and why actually this happens. And the passage had things like animals not fearing humans because they bond with humans, or they they become more tuned to human type needs, and hence they are no longer afraid of it and they come in contact. Or how wild animals react when they come across domesticated animals. So things like this. So this is animal rights theory. So non-human animals have moral rights and their suffering should be minimized. Opposes factory farming. For example, there can be passage upon, say, if in America, what happens, there are huge farms for uh, livestock rearing, which are finally, culled beef. So, oppose animal farming, animal testing, exploitation of animals. Environmental pragmatism. Basically, pragmatism, as we read in the ethics class, it's basically practicality. and focuses upon realism, which is which is a possible solution today. So core idea advocates for practical, feasible approach to solving environmental problems without strict adherence to any one ethical theory. So this is, for example, say I live in a house and we have solar panels installed on our house. So one of the reasons is that it minimizes our electricity bill, but is also reducing our need for thermal based power. So this is a pragmatic solution and also helps the environment. Okay, yeah. So focuses on achieving tangible environmental benefits rather than philosophical debates. A very good example of this is, as we'll study later on, is nationally determined contributions of, say, any country, even India. So India, what does it say? That by 2030 we aim to have 50% of our energy capacity from renewable sources. Okay, or we aim to create a carbon sink of additional 1 billion tons, or we aim to, by 2070 we aim to be carbon neutral. This is not an NDC, but say, let's say it's one of the goals that we have, but we aim to be carbon neutral. Things like this, moral implication is promotes compromise and collaboration across different value systems. So one compromise is that, say, uh, we have become 50% renewable. So that's a kind of a compromise. No? We are not 100%, so we are 50%. So that's compromise. And collaboration is because it tries to bring all the NGOs, people with environmental knowledge, people with scientific and technical knowledge on one table, and then charts out a plan. Then you have the Gia theory. It's known as the Gia theory. What it says is that Earth is a self-regulating living organism where all components interact to maintain balance. So it says that Earth in itself is a living, say it's a living being. So it will try to self-regulate itself. Humans must respect Earth's process and avoid actions that disrupt the balance. Right. But remember one thing, this Gia theory is like anti-Gia theory bhi hai, which says that since you say it will self-regulate, then whatever we do, it should regulate on its own. So that is anti-Gia theory, often given by those who are anti-proponents of climate change, like against climate change and all. Against climate change, as in, who are against the very idea of climate change, that there is any climate change going on. Typically, say Donald Trump. Then this was basically about environment and the different concepts of environmental ethics. Now we shall move to important concepts of urban ecology. So urban ecology is basically the urban area, that is cities, high-rise living, community parks, and marrying them with ecological concepts or ecology, and how is it different from a, say, natural setting. What are the ethical dilemmas that you may come across? What are the problem? What are the challenges? So key themes will understand urban ecosystems. They're created by humans, artificial ecosystems where natural and human systems interact, biodiversity in cities, how species adapt to urban areas, and strategy to conserve urban biodiversity. For example, you see dogs adapting to localities or places. You see monkeys adapting, etc. Then ecosystem services. So what are the ecosystem services, or the services that are provided by the ecosystem that urban people can enjoy? For example, parks or green spaces. One of the services they provide is of regulating the atmosphere, or cleaning the atmosphere. So that is one of the ecosystem services. Air and water purification, for example, and sustainable urban development. So how can we make urban cities which are sustainable for socially as well as environmentally? But today we'll focus more on environment, reduce environmental impact. The concept of, say, compact and connected cities, or mass transit systems. So all this is sustainable urban development, so that per capita emissions are reduced. So these are important concepts. We'll just go through them quickly. For example, human and ecological theory. It says that applies ecological principles such as competition, succession to human social systems in cities. The urban area function like ecosystem with zones competing for resources. So you have zone number one, or zone number two, dwelling number two. So, and you have minimum water. They both will compete. So they will compete like in maybe by purchasing power capacity. So whoever is rich will try to get all the resources or most of the resources for itself. So this is how basically urban ecology or urban it tries to justify the not justify but the but tries to give reason of why this competition happens in urban areas and why then we finally become exploitative of the environment as a whole. Then you have urban metabolism. They say that cities function like a living organism, consuming energy and materials while producing waste. So it says that urban area is a whole living organism. Now we produce waste and that waste needs to be excreted, so it's thrown out. So what it says is we need to improve resource efficiency, create sustainable metabolism. That is whatever circular economy, for example. So whatever we are consuming, and finally it goes to waste. This waste needs to be rechannelized, say either as energy or recycled into something useful. A very good example of this is city of Indore. So what they do, they have very good waste collection. Then they use this waste to create biogas, and this biogas is used to run the buses in the city. So this is circular way of living, right? Yeah, it says circular economy or renewable energy integration in urban areas. So typically this solar scheme is for urban areas, so that you can integrate renewable energy in urban places as well. Then urban heat island effect. So what it says is that typically due to excessive localized pollution, either by say vehicles, cars, sorry, industries, vehicles, industries, or typical methane emissions from wastelands. What happens is that this is an urban area, and this is say rural area one, rural area two next to it. This particular area is warmer than the surrounding rural areas, and specifically due to things such as excessive basalt on not basalt, sorry, yeah, gravel, that I guess, or say excessive construction or bitumen. I was saying basalt, sorry, bitumen on the which of which road is made up of. So they are heat absorbing materials. Concrete, it's heat absorbing, so it also creates a urban heat island effect, whereas the surrounding areas are cool and there is a small hot urban area in between. So what happens, it affects local climate. So unpredicted rainfall increases because say there are PM particles also there, and it's excessively hot. So what happens is that these PM particles of their particulate matters typically act as nucleus for water to condense, and then it falls, increases the energy demand for cooling. So the more hot these areas are, more energy demand there will be for cooling, or for reducing the deficit, sorry, reducing the difference between urban areas and rural areas. So heat difference typically. So more energy that you is required. Yeah, mitigation and all you can read on your own. Then you have landscape ecology and patch dynamics. So what it says is that urban areas are mosaics of patches. Like you have concrete, and then some green parkings in between, interacting with landscape matrix. So planning green corridors is very important, specifically for improving connectivity to wildlife. So what it means is, say that this was an urban area U1, and this is urban area U2, and 50 years ago all of this was forest land. Now, say this there was one path for elephants to move across this land. Now what has happened, since urban area 1 and urban area 2 have come over here, this path is disrupted. So you must have ecological corridors in between. That's why in India you have something known as elephant corridors across states. That is very important. Balancing urban development with natural areas to preserve ecosystem functions. So what it says is that there is development of urban areas, typically roads, high rises, schools, malls, etc., must also make sure that the natural areas next to it are also preserved and ecosystem as a whole functions properly. So ecosystems are made up of many actors. Any one of the actor, if there is an effect upon, or this when any one of the actors is either eliminated or removed from the ecosystem, it will have a detrimental effect upon the whole ecosystem. That's why it calls for balancing urban development. Then there is something known as compact city theories that the advocates for high density urban areas to reduce urban sprawl. Reduce urban sprawl, improve resource efficiency, and promote sustainability. So typically, say this is one high-rise building. This is much better than 10 individual sprawls. Reason being, lesser concrete is used in this, better resource sharing happens in this, and sense of community is also better in building, because see, say government can say that okay, every building should have, for example, in Bangalore, it is mandatory in certain areas to have your own decentralized waste management. So this is much easier to be implemented in buildings. Hence the idea of compact city theory. So you can read the advantages. You can preserve the surrounding natural habitat, reduce carbon footprint through public transport or shorter commutes. So everybody is living at one place, so you can have just one mass transit or metro station over here to the workplace over here. So that's how. And in most European cities, this is what happens. So everybody lives over at some area, and then there is this area is known, say workplace, and everybody is living in the suburbs or nearby, and all of them are connected with high density lines of public transport. Then you have resilience theory. These are very simple, that urban systems need to be resilient. So they should adapt to shocks. For example, any sudden change, it should not bring the whole city to a standstill. Urban system must adapt to shocks like climate change, हो गया, disaster, हो गया. Recently they say that we need to make sponge cities. कि suddenly बारिश बहुत ज़्यादा आई, तो it should not flood and everything should not come to a standstill like it happens in Gurgaon. So Tokyo is a sponge city. It has very good mechanisms to channel excess water, and they are underground. So that's one thing. So designing flood resilient cities, वही मैंने बोला, spawn cities, incorporating flexibility in urban infrastructure to cope up with future uncertainties. For example, earthquake. So earthquake resilient infrastructure is important, something like that. Okay. Then ecological footprint analysis is that what is there is something known as carbon footprint, right? So how much carbon dioxide, say per capita or per person, is being added to the atmosphere. Ecological footprint is a more holistic measure, that how much damage is caused by one person's needs to the ecology. So measure the environmental impact of cities. And in this case, since we are studying urban areas, so we are talking about cities. So environmental impact of city one, city two, city three, in terms of resource consumption, waste production. Okay, basically it's that. Then you have concept of biophilic cities. Cities should integrate nature into urban design and improve human well-being and biodiversity. If you read, Bhutan is coming up with a new kind of city which is touted to be one of the biggest biophilic cities in the world, and it's coming just next to the India border only. So you can search about it. Then smart cities and technology in urban ecology. So what happens is that with technology you can boost efficiency and also ensure that resources are used wisely. So that's what smart city planning is. So you can have a command and coordination center. You can have proper waste management. You can track your wastes. You can make sure that the water that is in the, say, sewage, and the water which is there in the pipes for drinking, they do not mix with each other. So you can develop technology like that. So it will also help you solve the problems of urban areas specifically related to environment. So India, you have something known as smart city mission, where we aim to have, I guess, more than 100 smart cities. Example, Bangalore has a smart city mission. Indore is also a smart city. So things like this. IoT based water and waste monitoring system, smart grids for energy management. This is also very important. So that everybody knows how much energy they are using, and they can take proactive measures to conserve energy. And then there is political ecology for urbanization. That is making sustainable urbanization a political discourse, so that people demand urban areas to be sustainable, to be not extractive of the environment. For example, this happens in advanced economies a lot. In Germany, for example, there is a whole political party, which advocated for Germans or the German government to shut down its nuclear plants, because apparently, or more so, even logically, a nuclear disaster or even say nuclear waste is very difficult to manage and causes environmental harm. So this is what urban political discourse is. So this is can be applicable also in a particular urban area. For example, unequal distribution of green spaces and exposure to pollution. This can be challenged by people. Role of marginalized communities in shaping sustainable urban futures. For example, how recently our prime minister only, talked about planting of trees in urban areas and afforestation of urban areas. That's also kind of political bringing positive action into a political discourse. Her made per paid initiative. So this was basically about urban areas. So we studied about environmental ethics. We studied about how typically in urban settings, environmental and ecological concepts intermingle with humans and our lives, and what are the problems and theories surrounding it. And then now we'll come to climate change, and I'll over here only talk about few key climate change policies that have developed in the world. You can read the whole list, but done I have highlighted few of them which are important and I'll teach. Is that first is UNFCCC 1992, so known as Rio Convention. Here it was decided we actually in 1972 we first realized that there is something known as not exactly climate change but that we need to be sustainable. So there was something known as Brut Lands report and it said we need to live sustainably. That is uh, save something for the future generation as well as protect our environment. So UNFCCC was formed in United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change took place in 1992. In Rio de Janeiro. Goal was to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas typically, as I said, carbon dioxide, methane, etc. Then there was the famous Kyoto Protocol, which said that developed countries need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and legally binding standards for industrialized countries to reduce GHG emissions by 5% below 1990 levels. So remember this thing, इसमें developing countries now voluntary, मतलब there was no, it was not mandatory for developing countries such as India, Bangladesh or South Africa, BRICS nations, China to be a part of this. So इसके अंदर emission trading की बात है, the carbon markets that you talk about, clean development mechanism, joint implementation, etc. were parts of it, not necessarily important for you to know. This you should know: emission trading, carbon markets. Then we come to directly Paris Agreement. So it was in 2015. इसमें they tried to rope in even developing countries such as India, China into conserving environment, and they set a goal for themselves to limit global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius and preferably below 1.5. This was the time when nationally determined contributions came. As I said, right, India has given a nationally determined contribution of at least having 50% of its energy mix as renewable by 2030, reducing carbon intensity of economy to 45% of 2005 level, etc. So you can read about them also. This was important. Then you had Glasgow in 2021. Here, they started talking about phasing down coal power. Something, if you want to read in detail, you can read about just transitioning from coal. JTEP, I guess there is some coalition that has been formed for just transition from coal. And then this one was the recent one where loss and damage fund was operationalized. I'll talk about this in a bit. But yeah, these are the main climate meetings that have been held, and you should know about this. The major reason is the passage might come, you know, refuting how, stating how this one was a failure or Kyoto Protocol actually failed. And if you have some idea about what the targets were, what it was, it will be easy for you to handle those. And now we come to key terms in climate policy. These are more important. So first term is neutrality. What this means is that say I am country A. I have I emit say 100 tons of CO2. Now if I have say planted enough number of trees or have some sequestration is absorbing carbon dioxide. So some human inventor artificial sequestration mechanism, and I absorb 100 tons of CO2, then I'll be a carbon neutral country. ठीक है, so net zero जिसको बोलते हैं कि 100 दिए 100 ले भी दिए. So today आज की डेट में ना I guess only Bhutan is one of the carbon neutral countries in the world. And it's a carbon positive country, so it absorbs more than it releases, achieving balance between emitting carbon and absorbing it. Then greenhouse gases we talked about: CO2, methane, N2, N2O. Yeah, N2O is also greenhouse gas. Trap heat in the atmosphere, contributing to global warming. Then you have nationally determined contribution. I said, climate action plans submitted by countries under Paris Agreement, outlining their emission reduction targets and strategies. पहले क्या होता था, लोग बोल देते थे, कुछ करते नहीं थे. So to so as to make countries kind of accountable, at least like nobody will be able to do anything, but actually accountable on paper, and for them to have something committed. This was adopted, nationally determined contributions, that you will announce to the world that we are going to do this. So अगर नहीं करोगे तो तुम्हारी बेइज्जती भी होगी. So that's what the intention was behind it. Then carbon pricing. There is a market-based mechanism for carbon trading. You should know about what carbon trading is. I'll just tell you in a bit. Say to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, or say greenhouse gas emissions, what they do is they will say that every company can only say in automobile sector, every car manufacturer or company can only emit 100 tons of CO2 equivalent. CO2 equivalent is that तुम कुछ भी emit कर रहे हो, मीथेन कर रहे हो, या N2O कर रहे हो, anything you are emitting, it will finally be equated to carbon dioxide. कितना carbon dioxide emit किया है. So, and there will be some multiplying factor, right? So now what happens, say I am one company A and you are one company B, making cars, or I'm making cars, and we both have industry set up. So now I am manufacturing car and I have an industry, and I emit 120, but you emit only say 80. So now you have 20 extra left with you, which you could have emitted, right? There was a cap of 100. So now this 20 you can sell to me because I exceeded by 20. So this selling happens in a market, like a stock market kind of a thing, or a market where price of 1 ton of carbon is quoted. That is market-based mechanism. So these are different types. You may, or maybe may read it if you want. Then there is something known as adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation होता है to measures to cope up with the impacts of climate change, and mitigation is efforts to reduce and prevent climate change. For example, say you are making embankments to reduce the floods, or say you are making strong homes or structures so as to not be negatively impacted in an hurricane or earthquake or something like that. That is adaptation. But mitigation is you are taking steps so that climate change ab na ho. For example, there is less pollution. For example, instead of coal-based industries, you are going for renewable energy. Adaptation and mitigation. So why this is important is because there is a criticism that most of the money for climate finance is used up in mitigation. Nearly 70% goes to mitigation and very few on adaptation. So adaptation is important because अभी तक जितना emission हो गया, या अभी तक जो global warming हो रही है, climate change हुई, उससे there are a lot of problems that arise, specifically in least developed countries or poor countries, and उसके लिए there is less money. Then climate resilience, you can read on it's very simple, that communities prepare and recovery पहले से ही उनकी तय, मतलब making strong communities that are able to withstand the changing effects of climate. Renewable energy transition is that shifting from non-renewable sources such as coal, gas, petroleum to renewable such as I guess nuclear also is renewable, and electricity, or solar electricity, मतलब renewable kind of electricity either by wind, solar, etc. So those kind of things, solar, wind, hydropower. Then you have climate finance, as I said, to funding of adaptation and mitigation projects across the globe so as to reduce the effects of climate change. एक ग्रीन क्लाइमेट फंड बनाया था फॉर एग्जांपल, जिसके अंदर इट वाज promised that the developed countries will donate $100 billion yearly by 2020. This has not yet been achieved. They have neither donated and nor are showing keen interest in reaching this target. Then there is something known as sustainable development goals. These are goals that we as a world have decided to achieve by 2030. You can read about them, not important. Carbon sequestration we talked about. Loss and damage concept, I'll tell you what happens is that we say that USA, Europe, and these advanced economies, they actually developed at the behest of environment. So matlab, they polluted the whole, they were the ones which emitted most carbon dioxide. They were the ones who polluted the whole atmosphere, and unki wajah se there has been climate change. So now they are responsible and they must pay for the loss and the damage that is caused around the globe. So now you have disturbed the climate, but its effect is seen most in poor and developing countries, or small island nations, as they say. So they are responsible and they must pay for the loss and damage. So this is what you can read. So that's basically it. Decarbonization is again steps to reduce the carbon emissions. इसके अंदर वही renewable energy आ गया. You buying electric vehicle is also kind of decarbonization if the electricity is made from renewable sources, etc. This you it's not important. This is important. Common but differentiated responsibility and respective capacities. This is a point which is often raised by developing countries like India and underdeveloped, least developed countries. They say that the responsibility is common to protect the environment, but it's also differentiated in the sense that if USA gives rupees 100, India will only give rupees 10 because USA is more developed and it's only responsible for the climate change. So it's common but differentiated. And respective capabilities mean yes that everybody will work towards ensuring climate justice, but at their respective capabilities. So do not expect USA to spend rupees say 50 and also country like Maldives to spend rupees 50. So everybody will do as per their own capacity. Okay, one thing also trivia is that USA never signed the Kyoto Protocol to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And whenever, uh, not whenever, but as soon as Donald Trump came in power, last time, I guess what happened in 2017, right? USA pulled out of even the Paris Agreement. So now we have to see if they pull out again of the recent COPs. Then there is something called climate justice. Climate justice is that recognize that those least responsible for climate, poor people or poor nations as such, are often most affected, and thus the justice needs to be given to them. So that's why you have these uh, green climate fund, adaptation fund, etc. So yeah, this was it. And then we have some anti-climate change theories because up ki baar Trump sarkar is there, and the whole Trump administration nearby are many of them are climate change deniers, and they say that climate change is just a hoax spread by the leftists to gain global control or something like that. So anti-climate change theories are also important. They may give you a passage from this, so you can read what are the basically what are the ideas they present. Some people say it's a natural phenomena. Yes, like in past also, global concentration of CO2 has been way more than it is now, and Earth has survived. So it's not past as in like not humans past, but like the Earth's on a geological time scale. Then many say data is manipulated or only one-sided. Then there is global cooling hypothesis. If you have seen this movie Day After Tomorrow, there instead of global warming, what happens suddenly the Earth cools down drastically. And even in our geological past, we have seen that there were great ice ages, right? So opposition to climate change policies. So basically, they say that economic growth is more important than climate action because specifically developing countries often say this. Reason being, developed countries are already developed, so they have that X amount of lifestyle that everybody wants to achieve. That's why economic growth is important. You also see today USA people in USA specifically say Vivek Ramaswamy. He said we must do fracking and use that oil because economic growth is more important. So then you have say technology will fix it. Like we'll develop some technology that will finally help us win over climate change, something like that. And developing countries should act first. Yeah, many people believe that developing countries like India and China should act first. Iska reason they give is that you have more population and you can do it now because your lifestyle is not like that. So some argument they give. Then many of them say that conspiracy theory, climate change is a hoax. Then there is this Agenda 21/2030 conspiracy. Are the climate change policies are a plot for global control? That there are certain people who want to take global control and drive the global narrative. Then there are some genuine concerns regarding climate change policies, like mitigation and adaptation. For instance, renewables are unreliable and costly, so they also create a differential. Like nations with the capacity to make renewables and also invest in it will be able to deploy renewable technology, but not the poor nations. uh, and also it says that renewables will cause a lot of social change as well. Those employed say in natural gas sector or those employed in petroleum sector, where will they go? So you need something, they say that you need just transition, which is socially, economically, and environmentally just. Then climate change is overhyped. Often at times, climate change gets so much overhyped that it derails certain very important projects. So, very good example is, if you remember, Narendra Modi ji in one of his speeches while inaugurating, there was this bypass, not exactly an underpass near Pragati Maidan to Noida, which he was inaugurating, and he said that it was opposed by urban Naxals. He said, yeah, it was opposed by urban Naxals, saying that it will cause, a lot of pollution and cutting down of trees. And there will be a massive deforestation, and also may lead to pollution because of construction and all. But then he says that these people ignore the fact that because of this underpass, traffic and time and the time both will reduce. And now they don't factor in the thing that since time is reduced, traffic is reduced, the cars are no longer uh, emitting CO2 for a long periods of time. So since there is less traffic, since car will now only take 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes, so it saved 20 minutes of CO2 emission, which earlier it would have emitted if it was stuck in traffic. So he says if you include this as well, this is a very positive thing. So something like this. Then I have given you a few cat passages based on with the help of ChatGPT that I generated, and you can also generate on your own. Uh, One thing you need to remember is in this topic of environment and ecology, try to always write something like this. Include a recent research conducted on the topic, but they will often, link it with some research and often give you conflicting researches. So you can also write include conflicting research on the okay, this should be conducted. Yeah, conducted on the topic. So you can include this as well. So this is a must. And then you can use intricate language and heavy vocabulary. That is fine. So these are two passages that you can see I made. One was on environmental pragmatism. So passage on environmental pragmatism. So it says giving a research. Then you can say on conspiracy theory of climate change. So it's giving how conspiracy theory affects what are how they are actually driving people out of the belief out of believing the notion that there exists climate change exists, etc. So you can just go through them. Yeah, just give me a second. Wait. Yeah. Now this is a practice Excel that I have made, and I've added the environment and science tab. So you can practice from here, right? I forgot to add the chat GPT prompts that you can give. I will add it and upload it on the drive. So even if you what they are about 37, 39, you just need to practice your just practice 5 or 6, or and if you can stretch it to 10, it will be more than enough for you to understand. This I have made, I've given a lot of very uh, exhaustible list so that you don't miss out on anything, right? So yeah, so that's about it. I hope you understood the basic concepts that we read today in environment, urban, climate change, urban ecology, environment, climate change, then anti-climate change theories and all. Oh wait, just give me a second. Sorry. Yeah. So thank you. I don't think so. I have anything else to teach for today. Thank you, and keep practicing. See you in the next class.